Welcome to Right on Track, a songwriting podcast. Thanks to Tone for tuning in. I'm Demi Michelle Schwartz, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on my songwriting journey. So kick back and relax, don't fall flat, and remember, stay right on track. Hello everyone, welcome back to Right on Track. I am so excited because I have a returning guest today. Please welcome Dani Galasso.
Hi, Demi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So you were on last year and it's been a while. So what have you been up to since then?
Yeah, so I've been working on my upcoming single releases and EP, just mostly doing production stuff, working with some producers that are helping me with it, recording final vocals, and just kind of getting ready to actually release it all.
Yay, I'm so excited. Well, I'm really excited you're joining me today because we are going to be talking all about cultivating the artist's voice, and I'm very excited for this. So I think you have an awesome quote to kick us off. Do you want to read that?
Yeah, so this is actually something I just heard this week, which it just felt so relevant to what we're going to talk about. And it's not my quote, it's by this woman named Gemma Sugrue. She's a vocal coach. And what she said was, you want to find singing that feels like breathing.
I love this. It's so simple, but it says so much. So what does this mean to you?
Yeah. So I think like the first thing that really stuck out to me was the end of it. It feels like breathing. I think it makes me think about, you know, singing being just as easy as talking. Breathing like takes me to a place of talking, and also like just that it should maybe feel natural, or maybe even meditative. Like all those things kind of like come to mind. And I think the other thing that comes to mind is she says, find singing that feels like breathing, which I feel like insinuates the idea of discovering your own voice until it gets to feel as easy as breathe does. Um, so I don't know. It's something I think about a lot because I think that even as you become a stronger singer, it's like it's easy to still push your voice, I think. And so, like, I find this idea really grounding.
That's perfect. I definitely picked up on the similar things you did. The whole singing, like breathing, being something that's natural and something that you don't really have to work for a whole lot and overthink because especially like now like I'm taking vocal coaching lessons and so I'm definitely trying to improve my voice and I'm thinking about so many things where it's almost like it's more mental than physical because you need to think of all these things like where to breathe and prephonatory tuning and all these different things. And when we're breathing, we're not thinking, okay, lungs, we gotta inhale and then we gotta exhale. Like that's not how that works. And I think like until we're more comfortable with our voices and singing, we don't have that natural quality. And I think this quote is amazing because, like you said, we do have to find that we have to continue to discover ourselves. And the more we discover ourselves and work on our voices, the more natural it will become. And I think singing is something that doesn't ever get perfect. Like I think we're always growing and as we change as artists, whether that be what we're writing about or the kind of styles that we're singing, we're definitely going to have to change our voices and what makes us an artist. And so I think that's something always changing, but even though that's the case, it should still feel natural and nothing that feels foreign or out of place.
Yeah, totally. And that's like not to say that, you shouldn't be practicing your voice and, you know, thinking about the little things that make a vocal performance interesting and fun. But I think like sometimes it is you do get caught up into it and you're like thinking about so many things. And then it's like to an extent it's almost important to throw the rule book out the window and just be in the moment because if you like think about too much then it's really hard to actually execute something in a
Yeah.
natural way.
Yeah, for
It's definitely a
sure.
fine balance.
Yeah. No, completely. I think like too, like the more you do it, like these things will start to be more subconscious, like how breathing is and all of that. Like these things that we're having to think of so actively now, we're still making note of them, but it's not as in the forefront of our minds. So I think that's kind of
Yeah.
where we're aiming for.
Totally. Completely agree with that.
So, one way that we start to develop ourselves as artists and our voices is by singing cover songs and being mindful and really analyzing the voices and vocal performances of other artists. So, what's your experience with this as you started to discover who you were as an artist?
Yeah, so when I think back to when I was a lot younger, and didn't know my voice very well, I remember I wasn't always in love with the idea of singing covers. Even though that's kind of like where everyone starts. I mean, you don't just like wake up and start singing your own songs. But the reason why I sometimes didn't like singing other people's songs is because I found that, the original singer's voice was just a hair out of my range, or, I couldn't belt a specific phrase or whatever. There's always something. And so I found trouble finding songs that like were a perfect range for my voice. Um, so I kind of like despised singing covers for a while, but I did still sing them whether I knew I was or not, like just by singing along with the artists that I grew up listening to, or, memorizing their albums. Like I eventually, without intentionally doing it, was kind of always singing along with those artists. And I think everyone does that. Everyone kind of organically starts to develop the style based off of who they listen to, whether they're conscious of it or not. And I think that like that's kind of one of the best ways to start learning, because it helps you, attach onto a style or a voice, or a maybe a range, like your natural ranges of singing might be similar to someone that you listen to. um, so I think I see it a lot more differently now, because I realize the value in using other people's songs as a starting point. And you also start to realize that you can really make covers your own. Like it doesn't have to be the way that it was originally first sang. Like you can change the key, you can sing in a completely different style. Like you can sing a pop song as an acoustic cover. I mean, there's so many different things you can do with the song, and you don't have to like sing it exactly like the original singer did, which I think is a huge unlock for people that maybe feel like they can't sing exactly like someone else. It's kind of like you just don't have to.
For sure. Yeah, so many great points. Great points. I think like when I started to do covers, I was kind of in the mindset of, okay, this is how the artist did it, and so I want to do it like the artist did it because to respect the art and all of that. But as I started to cover songs more, that's when I started to do kind of what you were saying, changing things and taking note of things. Like I started to sing songs in different keys because I knew when something was too low for me or too high for me, and so I found something that was comfortable for me. And especially like doing acoustic covers, like I would take very produced pop songs and do them with my guitar because I don't know production to do that myself, and just doing covers on YouTube and playing live, I'm not going to have a full-blown produced track to sing to. And so I had to find ways of changing it, and by doing that I definitely discovered my sound. Because also, it's like the songs that you choose to sing speak to you for a reason. So when I started finding myself covering pop and country songs, when I started to get into songwriting, because I was most comfortable singing pop and then country, those were the kind of songs I started to write. Like I'm not singing rock songs or really R&B, so those aren't, comfortable for me, and they wouldn't fit my voice either. Like can anybody see me singing a rock song? I don't think. And so I think that's how you start to discover what genres you can fit into. And then once you start writing, you know how your voice works. And you're like, okay, this key is comfortable. This is my strong part of my range. Maybe I'm going to set the chorus here. So it definitely translates into the songwriting. And then when you get to actually performing and releasing your own music, then you start to develop your own sound. So I definitely love covers. I still do them all the time. And to your point about, changing them and making them your own too, like actually releasing them. I released a cover of Homecoming Queen by Kelsey Ballerini, very different than her version, and I made it my own. So as artists, like sometimes like as songwriters we feel like we always have to write and do our own stuff, but I think it's really fun to take our own spin on another artist's song because that allows us to work other muscles as artists rather than just writing.
Yeah, totally. And I'm inspired by the fact that you released that cover. It's funny because since I've been doing so much writing and like focusing on releasing my original songs, I've actually been recently having the itch of doing like maybe like a cover EP.
Yeah. Oh,
And it's
yeah.
not something I've actually started doing, but it's something that like future me wants to do just because I think it would be really fun. And yeah, it just in some ways when you sing other people's songs, you're actually able to develop your like voice even more than when you're working on your own songs, just because it's like you're only focused on how to sing them.
For sure.
If that makes any sense. It's
No, it
like
definitely does.
it's has its like easy ways about it where it's like there's less things to worry about in a sense, so you're just only thinking about like the nuances to kind of make that song your own. And actually one thing I wanted to mention, this may be a little cheesy, but I honestly swear by it, is I really like watching the show The Voice
Oh, I watch it all
because
the
they
time. Yeah.
well, first of all, it's like free voice lessons, but secondly, it's like it's really cool and inspiring to see how the contestants on the show, take their own spin on the songs they do, because I mean they basically do covers the whole season. So I always watch every season now, and I just feel like it's gold watching each artist and also kind of identifying the ones that I maybe relate to more. And sometimes I get good ideas of songs I could cover from just like seeing what they do.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's cool to see it too because some of them are very creative and they really change the songs a lot. And just seeing that gives me more ideas of like what I could do, whether it's with my own songs or covers. And I think that, when someone hears a cover, if you do it exactly like the original artist, it's almost weird. Like people
Hmm.
expect it to be a little different. It
Right.
has to be a little different. Otherwise, they're otherwise it's more of a comparison game, which no one wants to be in.
For sure.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, those like competition shows like American Idol just ended the season, and even watching that too, it's so cool because you see the proof of how doing cover songs helps you develop your voice as an artist, because like watching them in the auditions to the ones who made it to like the final three, the top three at the end, they're completely developed artists now. Like they have their own sounds. Like when they get up to sing, no matter what song they say they're gonna cover, you get the vibe of like what it's gonna kind of sound like because you saw them develop themselves over the course of the season. And so I think those shows are great for inspiration and for proof that this works. But even when we're doing these covers and trying to develop our voices and all of that, there's definitely a psychological side of things and accepting our voices and loving our voices. So, what has been your experience with this?
Oh my gosh, this is so big. Okay, so I feel like this is big on like so many different levels. Um the first one, like first of all, this is like near and dear to me because as you already know, I've had struggles with my voice over the past year or two where I was like literally rehabbing it with support from my doctors and vocal coaches. And so I think like having just gone through that and kind of having my voice in a fragile place, like medically speaking, um, that even medically speaking, like that kind of bleeds into psychologically speaking, where it's like being afraid for me, it was like being afraid to continue hurting my voice or that like I wouldn't be able to sing again. And that kind of like in some ways fed into my voice not healing as fast as maybe it could have, which is a whole like I could talk about that forever. But I think like the way that we feel can really impact our voice. So in my case, like rehabbing, I was kind of like trying to get back to a place where I can use my voice regularly while singing and daily life. But the kind of fear that I had attached to like the whole recovery was kind of in some ways making it hard for me to actually be comfortable with my voice again. Like I went from like regular singing to like not being able to use my voice to kind of trying to build it back up. And so I think because of that and because of the different things I worked on in speech therapy, I was even more conscious of kind of like our voice being an extension of our bodies and how we it's literally an instrument that lives in our bodies. And so there's many things that affect it. And so I think, if you struggle with anxiety, for example, or if you're having a stressed day, or even if you didn't get a lot of sleep, like those things can all affect your voice. So it's like mental and physical um, variables that can make you kind of like have a better day of singing or not want to sing at all, or if you're feeling great, maybe feel more confident and want to sing. And so that's kind of like one thing that I think about when I think about the importance of loving your voice. Like you basically loving it even when it's not doing so hot. If
Yeah.
that makes sense. But but then like another thing that like maybe is more relatable to people that haven't been through this crazy rehab thing I've been through is just like generally having confidence in your own voice and generally thinking positively about it. And I think something that, going back to what I was saying before, it's like sometimes people, myself included, think like, oh, I can't belt this song, so it must be that I can't sing. And it's like once you start to think things like that, then you're kind of creating a blocker already. And then you really can't belt it. Like what you were saying before, it's so much of it is mental. And so it's just really important to like be aware of negative thoughts like that, because you're kind of creating a barrier to like maybe achieving the thing that you want to achieve. Um and there's so many different ways that this might manifest. Like it could be about belting, for example, or it could be about maybe the quality of your voice. Like, for example, I have learned that I tend to kind of sing with a more breathy tone, which is not really like a bad thing, but it's kind of like my default. And so I've for a while thought that that was just how I sang, but in reality, it's just that I didn't like I wasn't very conscious of it, and I didn't like explore different tones I could kind of use to my advantage. And so that's I think a good example of just being more aware um of what's possible, or like not limiting, like your belief of what's possible.
Mhm. Yeah. So much information. First, I really appreciate you opening up about your own experiences because yeah, that definitely played a role in your own journey of loving your voice again. So thank you for sharing that. And I think too, like kind of on the same wavelength as that, like even for those of us who haven't gone through a situation like that, we all get sick from time to time, get colds, have bad days, and that definitely impacts our voices. And this is always something that I'm majorly aware of, especially around studio days. Like if I'm not feeling well that week, it's like, oh crap, like I'm not gonna do my best. But the truth is, like our voices are kind of different from day to day based on how we're feeling physically, emotionally, and all of that. And so I think we need to learn how to accept our voices as they are, even on the bad days, like you said. And I think too, it's like it takes time to love your voice because when I started, I was so focused on like who my favorite artists were. And I was like, wow, they're so good. I would see them in concert and I would just be blown away. And then I'm like, well, I don't think I could ever sing that good. They're just so good. And so it kind of comes down a little bit to the comparing game that we all face sometimes. And so I had to get to a point where it's like, okay, I'm me. My voice is unique. Nobody else has my voice. And so you have to get to the point of not comparing yourself to others. And going back to the natural thing, like with the quote, we need to find what's natural to us. And so I think it's always just like trying to focus on yourself and what makes you feel comfortable and confident and not really try to compare yourselves to others because that will just give more mental stress and definitely impact the voice.
Yeah, totally. I was just gonna say that too. It's like the grass is always greener. Like people think like, oh, I wish I could sing like so high. And then people that have really high ranges are like, oh, I really wish I had that low part of my register like locked in. And it's always like that. Like I can't every time I talk about this kind of stuff with people, I find people actually like parts of my voice that sometimes I don't even necessarily like as much. Like it's not even like what you think about your own voice is like often not even like how other people experience
For
it.
sure.
But I just want to echo what you said, which is like finding that authenticity in the natural way that you sing is there's so many different reasons why that is what you should do. And the first thing is it's easier. But also
Yeah. Mhm.
I think that like the more you do that, the more empowering it feels that you're really just kind of owning your own voice and the more distinct you're going to sound because you're not trying to blend in with whatever you're listening to on the radio or whatever. But another thing that I just like kind of think about is like I'm sure you've heard like the idea of like own what your mama gave you. It's
Mhm.
like that I feel like that can apply to your voice too. It's like you like own it, like actually own it because literally no one is going to sound like you
Mhm.
and that's really cool.
Mhm, yeah, sure, for sure, absolutely. And this definitely takes time, not only from like the accepting it point of view, but also in being more confident and having a stronger voice, a more developed voice. And so aside from just doing, the typical vocal training and techniques, what are some other things you keep in mind as you move down this journey with continuing to develop your voice and get to a place of acceptance?
One thing, and this may or may not apply to everyone if, depending on if like you're writing your own music or not, but one thing that I think contributes to, our artist voice is really what we're saying, which may seem kind of like obvious or silly, but I think that's like something I've been thinking about a lot recently cuz in terms of when you're writing, I think for me, when I'm deep in, writing a chorus to a song or writing a verse to a song, I start to really think about what I'm really saying. And there's a bit of an interchange. So if I'm, I might think like if it's a love song, let's say, and it's kind of an angsty love song, and I'm writing angsty lyrics, then I'm starting to think like I need to sing this in an angsty way. And so it's interesting because that's like another extension of how you can express yourself. And you can go really deep with that. You could really think about a single word or like a riff or just an interesting way to say something, whether that's like singing it or even saying it, like speaking it out, and all of these things can contribute to kind of the way that you develop your artist voice because if you hear a song, you hear a singer sing it or speak it out, that was a choice that they made, and they may have made that like during the writing process, and you as an artist covering that song can decide to make that same choice and sing it or express it the way they do, or something else if you interpret what they wrote or performed differently.
Absolutely. I love how you brought this up because this completely goes back to authenticity. As songwriters, when we write things that are true to us, when we get on a stage or are in the studio ready to record, we're going to believe what we're saying. And I definitely had an experience with the other side of this where I didn't write authentically when I started songwriting. And so naturally, I was like, I don't like this song. And it was way more than that. It was the fact that, like, I didn't sound good singing it and it didn't feel right because the words I was saying were, like, false. And I think when you're singing and writing about things that are true to you, whether that be songs you write yourself or you're covering a song that has a message that means something to you, you're going to be way more mindful of the way that you're singing it. And I think that that's just going to lead to developing your artist voice because when you're singing about something meaningful to you, that's going to come across to your audience. And so they're going to start to see, okay, what different things, what concepts mean something to this artist that they consistently sing about or are passionate about. And I think the things that we stand up for and believe in and write about and talk about, that all contributes to us as artists. And so when we start to sing about them, that definitely comes across in the way we use our voice to do that. And so that's absolutely perfect. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, you know, in my experience, I have more songs written than what I plan on releasing. And I agree with you. It's like some of the ones I've written, I'm like, it's a cool song, like, but I just don't feel as strongly about it. And that I think it's important to pick up on that because ultimately people are usually attracted to emotional performances one way or another in pretty much every genre. So it's like if you can really stand behind what you're saying and really deliver upon that because you feel strongly about it, it's probably going to be noticed by your listeners versus just kind of passively, singing something that you just don't care about.
For sure. Absolutely. So, the last big thing I want to talk about is having recordings of us singing and how we can use those to further develop our voices. Whether this just be like an iPhone recording or an actual studio recording. So, what has been your experience with this?
So for me, recording is like I don't know if cornerstone is the right word, but we'll say cornerstone of like how I've developed my voice, to be
Yeah.
honest. I mean, in my experience, like I've kind of been singing my whole life, like choir, high school, college, just singing for fun, getting more serious about it, etc. But I feel like it really starts to become more serious when you start to record yourself. And that's something I've like gotten more and more comfortable doing over the years. And I had the ability to do it at home, both, like through my computer program and with like even my phone or whatever. But the more and more I've done that, the more and more I've been able to refine my sound. And I always encourage people to do it like as a way to get better, become a better singer. And even if like you don't like production or you don't want to be the vocal producer to your own songs, like just getting in the practice of doing it just for practice purposes is so critical and important because you never really know what you sound like till you like methodically listen
Yeah.
back. And the more and more you do that, and the
Yeah.
more and more you parse out like sections of your song or like a phrase, the more you can improve like aspects of it that you might have not heard. And it just it's so relevant for so many things. It's like intonation, like the way that you sing it, like the kind of the tone of voice you're using, whether or not it actually sounds expressed like in the way that you want it to be, kind of like what we were talking about before. Like, does it sound emotional enough, or does it really say what I want to say in the way I want to say it? And when you're doing multiple takes, you can hear it. Like when I go back to my takes and I'm maybe choosing the ones I like best, there's some that I'm like, that one just for some reason sounds better.
Mhm.
And the more that you kind of get used to hearing your own voice back on various recordings, high tech or not, the more that you kind of are in tune with what you want it to sound like. And I just think that that's like so valuable. Like the fact that we can actually use recordings to our advantage is super, super cool.
For sure. Absolutely. I always record myself like singing the songs I'm going to be actually recording over and over and over again. Doing different versions, playing it with piano, then playing it with guitar. Maybe making a little produced track to sing to get different vibes. Do I want this to be acoustic? Do I want this to be fully produced, pop, whatever? And I think like the more I do that with my own songs that I'm going to be recording to release, the more comfortable I get with them. One, from like the singing standpoint, where to put the breaths in, and like where to be more expressive and where to sing it a certain way with different tones of voice and all of that. So when I get to the studio to do it, it's not like free form and I'm just singing whatever. It's like I have a plan. And like you said too, with like some just sounding better, like when we comp the vocals, like there's some times where all three, like say I do three takes, like all three pitch wise are like perfect, but then my producer and I are like, okay, that's second one. And then we're both like, yeah, we don't know why the second one, but it's the second one. And so, like, there's definitely things that stand out. It can be the headspace that you're in. I try to, like, put myself in the situation I felt when I wrote the song to get back in that mindset and all that. But it all contributes. So, I think the more that I've recorded, the more aware of the things I've become because when I started recording, I wasn't very aware of, like, oh, where am I going to breathe and all of that. And I wasn't fully aware of how I was going to actually express myself while I was singing. And so, like, those earlier songs weren't as planned out, but now I'm definitely getting deeper with that. And so I feel like I'm becoming more consistent. And because I'm getting more consistent with the way I'm singing and presenting these songs, I kind of have a process now, and that allows my songs to start to sound more cohesive, which is giving my voice a more distinct sound. So I definitely think all of this plays a role, and recording and listening back is so important.
Yeah, it's like really great to take notes too. Like sometimes I'll literally write notes to myself being like, this is like the gentler part of my voice, or this is like more forceful, or this is enunciated, and it's like you scribble all over the lyrics, which is kind of fun to do actually. But I think, yeah, what you're saying is so on point. It's like the more that you're practicing, the more you're not winging it, and then the more that you can be in tune with your own voice. And I think like it's just an ongoing relationship that you have with your voice, and you start to like know where it shines more and where you can like pull back or not depending on what you're trying to do. What I find is that like by kind of planning out the song a little bit more, I'm more conscious of dynamics, which is interesting because sometimes it's like the appropriate thing is actually not to push at all. It's just to like calmly sing, whatever you're singing. Maybe it's a verse so that you can build up to the chorus. And those are things that like again, you hear more when you're recording yourself, and you can really hear those different scenes in the song, or even singing at a microphone. Honestly, I think singing at a microphone has been a really great tool because when you're singing a cappella, you can't hear your voice very well. Like you hear your voice how you hear it, not how other people hear it. And sometimes, like singing a cappella, it's like because I can't hear my voice amplified, I might be singing a part like louder than I need to be singing
Right,
it. Whereas
exactly.
if I'm in front of the microphone, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of level setting in a better way, not just because I need to do that when I'm performing, but also because it's just like I can hear my voice better. And I actually find a lot of times that I don't need to sing that loud for it to come across the way I
Right,
want it to actually come
absolutely.
across.
Perfect. Absolutely. Well, Danny, this has been lovely. I love chatting to you about this. Before we go, can you share any final thoughts you have about cultivating the artist voice?
Honestly, I want to just reiterate this, just the idea of practicing, because for me personally, like I I really thought this was a timely like conversation just because I've been working on my singles and my EP. And if we had this conversation last year, I would have had a lot less things to contribute, but I also know that I've become a better vocalist over the past year, and that's literally because of practicing. And I know that sounds so cheesy, but just like practicing on many different levels, like having a vocal coach, which I also started doing last year, literally practicing my songs, practicing recording, actually going in to record them, like having practiced all of the songwriting I've done. All of these things like end up organically culminating to finding your artist voice, but it just doesn't happen overnight. Like it in my case, it's like I would say I've actively been doing it for the past 2 years, where like everything before that was just me kind of passively singing and not like paying that much attention.
For sure.
But I've seen a huge difference in the past 2 years, and I'm much more confident about where I'm at. And so I think just like in general, keeping that in mind, it's kind of like you just have to take action and keep taking action. And then at some point you're just like, oh yeah, I kind of sound like this. And then you just up level from there, and you just keep working on it and finding the sweet spots in your voice.
For sure. Absolutely perfect. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I love how you said there that you have to take action, because I definitely think that as songwriters and artists, if we really want to do this, we cannot be passive about it. And that's something I became very mindful of recently. And not that I was a bad singer before, but I knew I wasn't the best singer I could be. And so I started taking vocal coaching lessons in March. And over the past few months, it hasn't been a very long time, but like I definitely grown. And it was a really great moment when I was at one of my studio sessions in May, and I recorded a song that's like a piano ballad for my upcoming EP. And I sent it to my vocal coach after because I was just so proud of how it sounded. And she was like, wow, this sounds so good. It almost sounds auto tune. And I was like, I didn't even like try. Like, I wasn't even trying. Like, I was trying, but I was thinking about different things. But she was like, it sounds so emotional. It sounds so like tuned and perfect and all these things. And I'm like, but I was thinking about being expressive. I was thinking about all the things that she taught me, and because I was being more active with my performance, like the pitch accuracy was like so much better. The expression was so much better. And so I think you and I have both gotten firsthand proof that practicing and being active about our singing and developing our voices definitely goes a very, very long way. But Dani, thank you so much for joining me again. It was awesome having you back. Can you share with everyone where they can find you on social and listen to your music?
Yeah, for sure. So, on Instagram, I'm Sounds Like Danny, and Twitter too. And then my website is soundslikedanny.com. And I will be releasing more music this year, so it's really exciting.
Yay! I'm excited for you. Well, thank you again for joining me. It was awesome having you
Thanks for
back.
having me.
Of course, of course, of course. You're welcome back anytime. Listeners, thank you for listening to another great episode with Dani Galasso. And of course, until next time, stay
Stay
right
right
on
on
track.
track.